With carbon capture and sequestration being a technology that our industry will face in the future, we've worked with UAB and established a center there which trains our next generation of engineers that would be responsible for carbon capture and sequestration. I'm going to speak mostly with regard to technical careers. So they have laboratories and curriculum now structured along a science angle that's not been there before. And this is designed to attract students to that university to learn about this particular area that will be of a need for us in the future. We have our sites. I mentioned the sites earlier. Those sites hire a diverse workforce at every one of the sites, and there's a large number of people at every one of them. And so those are that's a place where we're involved sort of in the hiring of those. I will mention something that's not been said. In the Southeast, we are the largest concentration of pulp and paper and wood products manufacturers in the world, I guess. Which means that as we talk about biomass, we have to factor in that industry. As we start to talk about biomass as a fuel source, it then begins to potentially compete with an industry that's already there and lots of jobs. And so we are very meticulous about the way we move towards a biomass future for electric utility, because we know that while it may hire a few jobs for us, it may affect another industry that's already established out there in the wood products and pulp and paper. So,
and I would just add to that our high tonnage project in West Alabama is focusing around short rotation, fast growing pine plantation products that would not adversely affect the pulp and paper product in the state of Alabama. So we too are very cognizant of that additional market that has to be factored into what we're doing.
Just barely over the state line in Albany, Georgia, is a plant Mitchell, which we are very close to converting to 100% biomass, and it'll use a lot of biomass from the state of Alabama because you draw from a 100-mile circle. It'll be the second largest biomass to energy facility in the U.S., next only to our facility in Texas. It is based on just what you said, refuse material that's in the forest that we can take without taking the big pulp wood that the wood products and the pulp and paper industry needs. So it's dedicated towards finding 100 megawatts almost of biomass that would not in any way disrupt the existing pulp and paper infrastructure that we have, and therefore create jobs while not affecting those that we already have. Biomass laying around in the bottom of the forest is not really a good thing. It just sits there and decays and gives off methane in a long-term sense. So it's a good thing to go in there and find a use for those sorts of biomass wastes.
All right, thank you.
I'm sorry.
Were there any other questions for the audience?
I think Cecil was going to make some.
All right, Cecil, I believe you were going to make some comments.
A couple of things. One is that I think that when you want to think about just continuing in this theme, one of the things that people might want to start thinking about around the country in what I'll call sort of the development process in communities and towns and states around the country. Some communities have begun to get together to create what are called community benefits agreements. So a developer may come into a particular community and say, we want to build, housing, or we want to build towers or something like that. And the community will say, okay, you have to go through, the government will say you have to go through this land use process. And as a part of that land use process, communities have gotten into the business of negotiating benefits from the developer in, I won't say in exchange because that's not the best way to put it, but if a developer wants to go forth with a development process, the community says, there are these benefits that we're looking for as a community. And in those community benefits agreements, they become legal agreements that can be enforced by community groups coming together in a court of law. In those agreements, many times, jobs and job creation is a specific thing that communities are talking about and looking for. And I think it's important for you to write this down, so community benefits agreements, and start reading up on those types of things. Because what will happen, I think, is that that might be a lesson that could be transferred from the development industry, where they're building houses and so forth, to the energy production and distribution industry. If we could get into the place where communities are actually saying, okay, fine, if you want to run this pipeline, if you want to drill this, if you want to do, coal ash or fly ash or whatever it is that you want to do, we understand what the risks are, and we are saying okay to this, but you also have to give these particular types of benefits. Because a lot of times what happens is that communities get into a particular place where they're actually promised certain things in the process to get the approvals that are necessary, and there's no legally enforceable mechanism. It's more like, okay, it was said in the process. And what you want to get at is a place where communities have more control over legally enforcing things that are promised, like jobs. Because a lot of these companies will come in and say, benefits, here are the jobs, and they don't, it's sort of like a projection. It's not a concrete thing that will actually happen, and sometimes they don't materialize. And then the last thing I'll say is that the EPA has a really good program called EPA CARE. It's Community Action for a Renewed Environment is what the CARE acronym stands for. And across the country, they've been in the various regions that the EPA, which is the Federal Environmental Protection Agency, separated into, has been pulling communities together in teams of community-based organization, community residents, health, government officials, businesses, to sit down and work through some of these very significant environmental challenges. And they work through the challenges, identify what the challenges are, and then they come up with a plan for remedying some of the risk and exposures that communities may face. And the EPA has provided resources to communities to engage in that process and to take the next step of actually making changes. I think that's an important thing to deal with some of the health benefits or health impacts that some of these processes bear on our community. I'll stop there because I've probably taken up way too much time.
Thank you, Cecil. 2 more questions, and then we'll move on to the discussion, or move on into the next phase of the discussion. What is the level of minority participation beyond hiring and some of the training programs as far as the actual projects that are taking place? What is the percentage or level of minority business participation as far as some of these different processes are concerned?
Well, again, I can't speak to the natural gas exploration side of it. In terms of our internal vendors that we utilize, normally it's right around 20% in terms of minority participation within our business or our company.
Thank you. Steve, would you mind elaborating on
Say the last statement you just made. Say what you just said.
Minority participation within our company, the vendors that we utilize within the company
When you
that actually do business.
When you talk about vendors, is that people who purchase natural gas from you, or vendors like your subcontractors?
Subcontractors, people that do work for us.
Okay.
Is that the question?
Right, and that's what we'd like to know.
Okay.
Who's participating in this process? Who's being a part of this? There's a large number of, there's a high dollar volume that was discussed as far as the business aspect.
Right.
So what level of business participation from minority companies? What is that level?
As head of research and technology management, that's not data that I know for Alabama Power. I mean, I know we have minority subcontractor programs, and we have, especially, I do know in our DOE programs where we do large research projects, we have a commitment to them that when we invest the federal government's dollars, that we have a percentage of that which is actually driven in minority directions. But as for overall for Alabama Power, I don't know the answer to that.
In terms of our focus, we have worked really extensively with communities in the Black Belt. We right now are working with potentially for a biomass capability in Tuskegee. Obviously, the project in West Alabama is in Black Bell. There is a biofuel operation that is now targeted to go into Greene County. So, again, our focus is on the rural economic development aspect of what we're doing.
Okay, thank you. And for those projects that are in these communities, what percentage of actual local workers are being hired or brought on to as employees in these projects that are, for example, the Kemper County that's coming? What is there a certain percentage of local people that you ensure are employed and not necessarily bringing in outside employees?
All of the full-time staff that will be there will be residents of Kemper County. All the construction will be through whoever brokers the construction project, and they will hire as many as possible from the local area because it's just better for them. It's more cost effective for them to get as much of their welders and their craft iron fitters and all that, get them right there from the facility, I mean, from the local area.
All right, thank you. And as far as dollars and cents are concerned, can you all speak to the cost differentiation between using the power that comes from nuclear versus natural gas, as far as why is it worth a community or for people to be interested in and investing in these alternative forms of energy versus our traditional, our traditional forms of energy as far as cost, consumer cost?
Our goal, the Research and Technology Function of Southern Company, its goal is to produce options which are cost effective, which allow us to produce electricity that is first reliable, meets all the environmental obligations that EPA puts upon us, and that are cost effective for the customers. So they're all weighed in terms of price. We have an evaluation process where we look at the cost of hydro and the cost of nuclear and the cost of coal, and we try to keep a robust mix. As you saw from the diagram I showed earlier, Southern is not just one type of fuel supply. We have various supplies so that as prices go up in natural gas, we can then fire something else, or we can switch over to hydro, or so we keep a nice robust mix of fuels so that we can manage to the lowest possible cost such that power bills to the customer are as low as possible. And I mentioned earlier that our rates are lower than the national average for all 4 of our states. They're lower than the national average, and we got there by making really good decisions on the type of power we have available to us.
Well, on the natural gas side, it's